rumor, and it was put out by one of their former broadcasters, so I kind of think there's something to it. All right, we're coming back. I don't know. Hey, Tri-City Sports Now. I'm Marky Billson, along with someone who people that have listened to 1420 NBC Sports Radio Tri-Cities, when really it was WEMB. It still is, but, different branding. May recall Paul Zeise, back in my first inclination of this show, used to work as an unpaid stringer. He would interview Heath Schuler for us. And, it went on pretty well from that. He's now a major sports talk show host in Pittsburgh and columnist for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. And, his son even plays defensive back for the Pitt football team. So, going places, Paul Zeise, it's great to talk with you again, my old friend. Before we get into Steelers-Patriots, the game of the week in the NFL, a game that could decide who wins the Super Bowl. Let's face it, in this matinee, I know you've always been a big Florida State fan, and Randy Sanders is being discussed as a potential head coach at East Tennessee State. And just fan perspective, what were your thoughts of Sanders as an offensive coordinator for the Seminoles?
I wasn't a fan, that's for sure. I actually wasn't a fan of Jimbo Fisher in general. I know he wanted to take away Jameis Winston. There's not a whole lot to get excited about with Jimbo Fisher. One of the things that always drove me nuts, there's a lot of Paul Hackett in Randy Sanders.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not a compliment.
No, it isn't. For those who, yeah.
You remember the days of, going to Pitt games and losing our minds because on 3rd and 7 they throw the ball 5 yards, sideways passes, 3-yard passes on 3rd and 4 and having to punt. Paul Hackett's offense leads the world in silly to punt.
Mm-hmm.
That's the bottom line. I was not a fan of Randy Sanders' play calling. I was not a fan of the offense at Florida State. So take it for what you.
I got two guys out there. I got one Tennessee fan from '98, Caleb Calhoun of All for Tennessee, Paul, who has been bashing Sanders. And then I've got you, and the comparison to Paul Hackett is quite damning. For those who don't know, Hackett was the coach at Southern California before Pete Carroll. And he was somehow, the last time Southern California was a loser, Paul Hackett was the coach. It was not now he's been a fine NFL assistant, but as terms of a head coach, that wasn't there. So that's a bit of damnation right there. Maybe, I don't know, Scott Carter, the athletic director at ETSU, might want to listen to the show and consider what he might be doing with his money if that's a legitimate rumor of Randy Sanders. But one thing that is legitimate is that the winner of the Steelers-New England Patriot games will be the team to beat in the AFC. I suppose you agree with that, or would you see Jacksonville somehow knocking off one of these two teams in the playoffs, Paul Zeise?
I think it's possible. I think Jacksonville, San Diego, or Baltimore could probably knock one of these two teams off, but you're absolutely right. The front runner in the AFC comes out of this game on Sunday, whoever wins, because the winner is going to get home field advantage. And frankly, I think it's far, far more important for the Steelers to win this game than the Patriots. The Patriots can come back to Heinz Field and win in the AFC Championship game.
has it been? We've gone to games in our youth, Steelers and Patriots, the coldest game ever at Three Rivers Stadium, if you remember that. And, the Steelers were always the team, certainly over the Patriots in hierarchy. Maybe not so now. The Patriots winningest team in the century, as well as now going to the most Super Bowls. So my question is, why have the Patriots in this century dominated the Steelers? They're 10-3 last 13 games.
Tom Brady. I mean,
Yeah.
pretty simple. Tom Brady, and here's the thing: the Steelers have a couple of problems when they play against the Patriots. Number one, the Steelers have played a lot of zone coverage, and a lot of times it's been a soft zone because they like to blitz. You're not getting to Brady often when you blitz. That's just not the way that you have to be able to rush straight up the middle, up the A gap. You have to be able to get there with four guys.
Mm-hmm.
That's number one. And the Steelers has never been their philosophy. There's always been a blitz team that plays zone in the back. You have to play man. You watch the Ravens and the Broncos are the two teams in recent history that have beaten the Patriots, in the playoffs and whatnot. Both of them had exceptional pass rushes from their defensive line, and they played man coverage. The Steelers don't really get a lot of pressure up the middle, and they play zone. So it's been easy pickings for Tom Brady. They've got to change something up. The problem they have is Cody Sensabaugh now is probably banged up. Joe Hayden probably banged up and not going to be back for this game. So I don't know if they have enough, and without Ryan Shazier, I don't know if they have the people to play man coverage. But they have to do that. They have to be able to do that a little bit, and they also have to, find a way to get pressure up the middle, which they should be able to with Tuitt and Hayward and those guys. So, long story short, Marky, it's been mostly a matchup thing on that side of the ball. The other side of the ball, this is the first time, and this is why I think the Steelers can win the game. This is the first time that the Patriots are seeing the full arsenal of the Steelers. And what I mean by that is, last year, in the regular season when they met, Roethlisberger was out. In the playoff game, Le'Veon Bell was hurt. They didn't have Martavis Bryant last year. They obviously didn't have Juju Smith-Schuster last year because he's a rookie. They have all three of their superstars are healthy. Plus they have Bryant. Plus they have Juju Smith-Schuster. So I think that this year they're equipped to actually outscore the Patriots. I don't know if they can. I don't know if they're going to have a lot of success stopping them, but I think they can outscore them.
Well, now you mentioned two guys there, and about the Steelers playing man, and you mentioned Cody Sensabaugh from Kingsport is out, but I've been reading some stuff about Cam Sutton and his the Tennessee cornerback and his development, really getting more and more reps in the Steelers defense. Tell me about his progression. I would imagine then that might be a player to watch, Cam Sutton, in this game.
With him and Sensabaugh, they've basically been mixing and matching. With Joe Hayden now, they've had to basically mix and match to figure out how to, man that other corner spot. Cam Sutton's young, obviously. Sensabaugh's sort of a little bit of a journeyman. They've got two guys that they basically are just trying to go with the hot hand. And Mike Tomlin said that as much, 2 or 3 weeks ago. It's not really a rotation. It's sort of a feel of who's playing better. Cam Sutton does some things better than Sensabaugh. Sensabaugh just has a little more experience and does some things better than him. I mean, if Sensabaugh's out, you're going to see a hell of a lot of Cam Sutton, that's for sure.
I would imagine. So what is Sensabaugh's injury?
I'm not sure. It's something, lower body. I forget. They had so many injuries this week. I think Sullivan is playing possum with the Patriots. They had so many guys that are listed on their injury report. I forget what his is. Like Juju Smith-Schuster, they list him as a hamstring, but I think he's going to be able to play. So I don't know what that means.
We're talking to Paul Zeise, who veteran listeners of the station will remember as the guy who used to interview Heath Schuler for us now. Hey, he interviews everybody. I mean, I remember your big interview with Ben Roethlisberger in Nevada. Maybe the less said about that, the better. And so, but that brings me to this question. Is this Ben Roethlisberger's last year, you think?
If they win it, yeah. I wouldn't be surprised. If they win the championship, I would not be surprised if he moves aside. Steps aside and, sort of rides off into the sunset, a champion, and, goes and just raises his family and, has a nice life for the rest of his life. I mean, I think one of the things is he's to the point in his career where he's accomplished pretty much everything he can accomplish. And he's not a guy that's really driven like, Brady or Peyton Manning to be the guy that owns every record and all that other stuff.
Mm-hmm.
He's relatively healthy, despite all the, the beatings he used to take, getting sacked all the time. And I'll tell you the other thing, Mark, I think the big thing with him, there's a real disconnect with him and his younger teammates. In other words, he doesn't really relate that much to his younger, you'd think he'd be the unquestioned leader in the locker room. He really isn't that. He also is just getting a little tired of all the young, I guess the millennials or whatever you want to call them.
Yeah.
It's just, when he came up, all the guys were, he had a group of guys like Heath Miller and some of those guys that he was always around and they were his buddies. Now he's like the old man in the locker room. And, when you're 36 or whatever he is, you got kids, you got married, you've got all that stuff. You're in a completely different place than, most of your teammates who are young guys, and they're still living in, early 20s with very little responsibility. And, I think that he's finally just to the point where, he doesn't relate to his teammates that much. And, he's healthy. He wants to get out of it healthy.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned that because I know that when I covered the Steelers, and it was the year before Roethlisberger came, I remember discussing him as a potential draft pick in the commissary with other writers. But no, the idea with Roethlisberger, I know, is that when he was a rookie, and of course he won his first 14 starts, but he was looked at as very brash, very cocky, and I always thought something of an ass kicker to maybe some complacent veterans who did sort of say, who is this guy? But the thing is, an ass kicker can get something done on the short term. And so look what happened. Win the Super Bowl, Jerome Bettis' last year. Next year they're 8-8 when it is unquestionably Roethlisberger's team, and you have that sort of fallback. It's well known he and Hines Ward never really got along and all this. You're giving me something. Has Roethlisberger, I mean, we know about it, off the field's troubles and all that, but the personality of Roethlisberger and all this, is it just not there so much to lead like a Tom Brady might be?
If you talk to a lot of guys in that locker room, he's never really been the leader of that, locker room. There's always been other guys. It's just, not his personality in some ways. The thing about him is he's really grown up from those days.
Yeah.
He going through all the stuff he went through early in his career, everything that went on in Vegas and Georgia, the motorcycle crash, all that stuff, the Sports Illustrated article, all that stuff, he really has sort of turned, he learned from it, the suspension, the 4-game suspension, he really came back and has tried to work on becoming a better person. And, the thing I like the most about him, he hasn't been somebody who's been out in the public trying to, manufacture image. You know what I mean? Like some of these guys, they go out and they try and manufacture these photo ops and stuff to try and, rebuild their image. He hasn't been that guy. He's been actually far more private than he ever was. He's sort of found God type thing. He's real involved in his church now. And, he's a better person than he was, 10 years ago. So, if you remember that 8-8 year, a big reason they were 8-8 was he had his motorcycle crash that summer, came back, and then right before the season, his appendix burst, if you remember.
Yes.
So he had an emergency appendix. He was never, ever healthy. He was never right that season.
I thought...
Season by far.
Yeah, I thought Cower, I mean, we're talking 10-year-old football of a team that's not in the area, but we're talking about 10 years. I thought that they relieved Charlie Batch a little too early than they should have. Hey, I'll tell you how big the Steelers-Patriots game is. We normally get the Titans in the Tri-Cities. As of this morning, they still had on the coverage, but they had not changed it. They will actually preempt the Titans for the Steelers and the Patriots in the Tri-Cities. It used to be that all of Tennessee was supposed to be Titans territory, and they're playing the 49ers. But, and trust me, it's not because I grew up with it. It's because I think it's a better game, and I think that the Titans-Niners game is really not of that great interest to people in the Tri-Cities. I certainly hope that WHAHL continues and will air the Steelers and Patriots as they are right now scheduled to do. But I want to finish up with this. You're a sports talk show host in Pittsburgh. You're a columnist there. I don't know if you saw this, but Fansided, the network, they just ranked the 250th best, let's say here, fandoms. And what I mean by this is not necessarily just sports here, but I mean fandoms of, say, Taylor Swift, or, say, Wonder Woman, as well as, say, the Ohio State Buckeyes and Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, and I presume, AC/DC and Donald Trump and Gilligan's Island and things like that. And of all the 250 best fan bases, considering all these things, the Rolling Stones, Star Trek, Star Wars, the Pittsburgh Steelers had the 8th best fan base, and the Penguins had the 14th best fan base of anything. So my question is, how good of a sports town do you think Pittsburgh really is? When you can say the Penguins and the Steelers, best top 15 fan bases of anything.
I would say the Penguins fan base that's ridiculous. Being that high. The Steelers fan base, maybe that high, but I mean, we're talking about everything.
Everything. Ohio State.
There's probably about 20 bands that have better fandom than any sports team could possibly want to have. Band/musical acts, Bruce Springsteen, guys like that. AC/DC.
Yes.
Led Zeppelin. I mean, just think about all of the bands that have unbelievable followings. I mean, and I would even go so far as to say some of these groups like Journey, who go all over the world and still sell out in places like Asia and Australia. I think no sports team should be in the top 20 in that, at least.
Ohio State is number 1. Okay. I think Aaron Judge is number 250. I didn't go through all of them. The story, you can go to allfortennessee.com. I got a guy named Caleb Calhoun, Paul, that comes on, talks about the Vols with me a lot, and came on earlier.
So Ohio State has a better fan base than Bruce Springsteen.
That's what the people at Fansided said. You can go to allfortennessee.com. They have a link to the piece, all 250 if you want. The Dallas Cowboys fan base, I believe, is number 13. Tennessee is the Volunteers, number 185.
When I lived in New Jersey, okay, they had Bruce Springsteen he had 10 concerts in like a 2.5 week period scheduled at the Meadowlands, where the Jets and the Giants,
sure,
which was like, 75,000 or something like that. Every show sold out. He added 5 more, and they all sold out within like 2 minutes. So there's no way. I mean, basically what you're telling me is you think Ohio State could sell out a stadium, 15 times in 3 weeks. I'm not buying that, and not for a second.
Well, it's something to check out. I thought that you might be interested in that here, Paul. Hey, Paul, let's talk again off the air sometime soon here. Get caught up, but between then, I got to go take a...
Before I let you go,
yes.
In about 2 months, Slaughter will be here. I think it's like that.
I may make a trip up. Is it on a weekend?
Yeah, I think it's a Friday night.
I'm going to go look at the hair band concert schedule online, and I'll probably be up there then. I'd be playing up all night, sleep all day, except I can't get any of the bumper music to work at the station. It's okay. It's Tri-City Sports Now, and we're back with a closing thought after this. There we are. All right.